In today's video, we are going to discuss Windows Virtual Desktop or WVD. It's kind of in the headlines nowadays. Well, it's something that you should know about, right? So, we'll get right to it. So, WVD or Windows Virtual Desktop is a VDI solution, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, what is it? It's basically, as the name suggests, hold on, virtual. So what is virtual desktop infrastructure? Virtual desktop infrastructure means that the client machines or the computers that you are going to have for your users or end users in the company, right? We are going to virtualize them, right? Rather than virtualizing just the server, now we are talking about virtualizing the client machines as well. So let me make a small diagram here, right? So let's say this is a server and there are multiple clients connected to this server, right? Each of these clients, is using something called as a client application. Clients are using client applications. All of them are using client applications and they are accessing the centralized server. Now, the idea is that since each of the clients, let's say a company has around 300 end users or 300 client machines, what are they going to need? They are going to need 300 systems. Well, 300 PCs, that's what they are going to need, laptops or PCs or whatever system that you would require. So what are we suggesting by VDI? I'm not getting to WVD yet. What are we suggesting in VDI? What I'm suggesting that you should do is that you take a client machine and you virtualize it, right? Because here, for 300 PCs to work, you will have to purchase 300 PCs, and let's say each of the computer has some configuration of let's say 8 GBs of RAM and 4 CPU cores, something like this. Now, is this too much? It could be too much if you're going for too many machines, right? And what does this machine do? It runs some client apps. Now, there are some disadvantages of this kind of a system, that okay, there is a system that's using some of the client applications. Let me explain to you what that is, right? So each of the client machine, each of the client is going to have, let's say, 8 GBs of RAM and 4 cores of processors. And now, important thing, each client is using multiple applications. Each client is using, let's say, well, one Office 365 or Office suite that's they are using, right? The Office client application, that's what I'm talking about, right? Other applications, they are using some XYZ application, something else, some custom applications for the company, right? There are multiple applications that they're going for. These are just like your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and stuff like that, right? So each machine to run, now these are client machines, each machine to run requires 8 GBs of RAM and they are running these particular applications. So what we are suggesting in VDI is that rather than having 300 of these machines, what should we do? We should replace them. We should totally replace them. With what? We should replace them by something called as a thin client. We should replace them by a thin client. That's the idea. So what is a thin client, if you're wondering? Thin client is again an end user machine, and end user is going to use that machine, but that machine, the idea of that machine is that it's not going to have configurations like this. It's not going to have like 8 GBs of RAM, 4 vCPUs and stuff like that. It's going to be a much less resource intensive machine. It's going to be something smaller, something for example, it would be, rather than being 8 GBs, it would be something like 1 GB of RAM and 1 processor core, right? So Now the problem is, how are you going to run all these applications in this, right? Because all of these applications are going to require something that is a little bit more of configuration. They are going to be kind of heavier, right? So how are you going to run all of these in this, right? So we have a solution for this. That solution is VDI actually. So let me get rid of this. The solution here is VDI. So how does VDI help us with this? The idea is that rather than running all of these applications on separate machines, right, separate multiple machines, let's configure a server, right? For the sake of simplicity right here, let's call it the VDI server, right? Now, the idea is that all of these applications, the ABC application, the XYZ application, whatever that is, the Office application, all of these things are stored in this machine as images, stored in the central machine or centralized server as images, right? Let's call it the VDI server, right? There are multiple companies that provide us the VDI services. There is Citrix, there is Windows, there is, there's Citrix, there's Microsoft, there is VMware, there are many more, right? But the idea is the same, that okay, there is a VDI server and there are multiple application images or the client images, and rather than giving these machines to the clients, what are we going to do? We are going to give clients smaller machines, or we are going to give clients the thin client machine. The end users are going to use these thin client 1 GB, 1 core machines, again 1 GB and 1 core machine, and this machine is going to access this server again, and this machine as well is going to access this server by using something called as RDP, remote desktop protocol, or remote desktop services. I should say RDS right here, right? It uses RDS, the remote desktop services. And what does the service do? It lets you access all of these applications again remotely, right? You don't really need to store it on the thin client. You just need your thin client to access those softwares that are hosted on that server. Now the configuration of this server needs to be pretty heavy duty, right? It needs to be a pretty heavy duty server. It should have, like, for example, 32 GBs of RAM, 8 cores of processing, a Xeon processor, Windows Server 2012, 2016, 2019, something like that. Now this, from moving from this to this environment was kind of difficult, right? We have been doing this for a while. We have been doing it for a few years now. This is called RDS services, or again VDI services in VMware and Citrix and all that stuff. Now the idea here is that you have, rather than having those heavy duty machines for the end users, you are going to provide them with the thin clients, and these thin clients can access the services remotely, and these thin clients can be placed anywhere. They can be placed from outside of the office or inside of the office or stuff like that. But the idea is you still had to configure a lot of stuff. Now Microsoft has introduced this new product, as we are discussing about today, is WVD. WVD kind of changes the game right here. What does WVD do? WVD is going to do a very, very simple thing. Rather than having this VDI server hosted in your data center, now very important, rather than having this VDI server hosted in your data center, Microsoft is going to put it on Microsoft Azure. So in VDI, what happens is that, okay, there's a server that has multiple applications installed on it. There are multiple clients trying to access that VDI server through an RDS machine or something like that. There is remote access involved and stuff like that. But in WVD, Microsoft has tried to make things a bit simpler, right? Make the solution a little simpler and move the solution to the cloud simultaneously, doing two things, making things more managed, right? So let me try to explain to you how that works, right? So rather than actually having a VDI server, Microsoft says that, okay, we already have a cloud solution called Microsoft Azure, right? So on Microsoft Azure, you are going to pick a service called, well, of course, you're going to pick WVD. Now, what is WVD going to let you do? Now, in WVD, you can actually create a VM. Now, you can actually create a VM which will act as a server. This can act as a server, right? Or you can create multiple VM images for each of the clients, right? Let me try to explain what that means. So when we are talking about this VM server, now this is going to be a VM that's going to have Windows 10 on it. Windows 10 for the clients that are going to be accessing the VDI images. This is for them, right? Windows 10 is on there, right? And on Windows 10, this is a special Windows 10. This is not your regular Windows 10. This is something that has been created for WVD. It's called Windows 10 multi-session. This is a multi-session Windows 10. Multi-session means that multiple people at the same time would be able to access this machine, right? So the idea is that this machine is going to be accessed by several people. It could be several hundred, it could be 20, it could be 25, but the idea is that there's only one client machine that has been configured for all of the users or most of the users. Now, really important, all the applications that we were talking about earlier, there's application like app 1, app 2, that they are custom applications, office applications, everything is already installed on it. We are installing it, we are configuring this machine so that applications are on it. Now, how is this any different from VDI? First of all, this is in the cloud, that's number one, but that's not much of a difference, right? The second difference is, now the requirement to access this has changed a lot, right? So Microsoft is going to provide you with a URL. Now this URL is common for everyone, right? You go to this URL, I'm going to mention it in the description box. The idea is that they are going to provide you with a URL, right? And let's say you are going with multiple clients, right? Multiple clients want to access this server and these applications, they want to use these applications, right? So they are going to make a direct claim to this application. They are going to actually hit this machine up, right? They are going to use this URL. In the URL, we are going to ask them for their credentials. They give their credentials and they're in the machine, right? These 3 people, these 15 people, there are multiple people here, they get a claim, they put in their credentials and they are in the server. They are in the server and they can access all these applications that are already there. Office Pro Plus is already installed on this Windows 10 if you are going for that, if you want that, right? My Office 365 Pro Plus would be a part of it. Now, there's one problem. What credentials are these? Are these the domain credentials or something like that? No. Here's where the things get simplified, right? For each of the users, let's call them Adam, Betty, and Randy. Let's call them these, right? So for Adam, Betty, and Randy, what are we looking for? We are supposed to give them some sort of credentials. Now, for Adam, Betty, and Randy, Azure AD credentials would work. We are going to give them all some Azure AD credentials, right? They are going to go to this URL, put in their credentials, and what are they going to see? Now you're putting this URL into a web browser, right? So let's take it from the perspective of Randy, right? Randy opens a web browser, right? They open a web browser. It goes. You put in the URL, right? You put in the URL. You put in the credentials. What do you see? In the URL, you are going to see Windows 10 machine, just like you see your VMs, right? When you're taking a remote access, right? It's just like using TeamViewer or any other software that actually gives you the window, that actually gives you the access to a particular application. Now, Randy is going to see, or Adam or Betty, they are going to see this Windows 10, but inside of their web browser. They could be using Firefox, they could be using Chrome, they could be using any browser of their choice. So, what is the minimum requirement for the client? What is the minimum requirement for the client to actually be able to access this centralized server? There's no minimum requirement. The minimum requirement here is one, an internet connection, two, well, a machine that supports a web browser. Ideally, this machine does not have to be a Windows 10 machine. This machine, by the way, does not even have to be a computer. This could be a personal computer, this could be a laptop, this could be a mobile phone, this could be anything you want it to be, right? This could be any device, an iPad, a tablet, a cell phone. Technically, your smart TV would qualify as well because it has internet connection and it has a web browser. Your smart TV, you can go put this URL into your smart TV, put in the credentials, and you will see Windows 10 on the device that you are going to access, right? And in that Windows 10, by the way, in that Windows 10, what's going to happen? You are going to get these applications that we were talking about earlier, App2, Office, and other applications that we have configured for them, right? That's one thing that they are going to get, right? And other than this, what are they going to get is that I just said that there's one machine that has all these applications installed, right? You can have that kind of a setup, or you can do one more thing. For each user, you can configure a smaller image, right? For each of the users, you can configure multiple smaller VM images, right? So that each user can access their particular VM, right? But if you're not into that, you can still go with a single VM in which there are multiple users concurrently accessing. How does that happen? Because Microsoft are using Windows 10 multi-session on this machine. They are using Windows 10 multi-session, and what does Windows 10 multi-session let us do? It lets multiple user access it at the same time simultaneously and use the applications that are on that particular machine, that are on that particular server. Well, there's one way to check how many users there are, right? Since you are using this machine, maximize it, right? Maximize it into the web browser. Go to the start menu or go to the task manager, click the user tab. You will see all of the users that are actually concurrently accessing that machine. So it's no different from multiple users trying to access a single machine. It's nothing different, right? The idea is that this is on the cloud, and these devices, rather than being simple computers, these can be PCs, these can be laptops, can be your tablets, can be your iPads, etc., etc., smart TVs. I've not so smart TVs as well. So many devices, right? So first of all, you are free from the device perspective. You're free. You can use any device that you like. You can use anything. You can use any device that you like if it has an internet connection and it has a web browser. And Microsoft also has some applications that you can use it for. They have an Android application for this. You can have an Android application. Again, it's under preview at the time of recording of this video. It's under preview, right? There's an iPhone application that we have. There's a Windows app that we have, and you can always access it over web. So there are so many ways to access it. This being the most common one, people try to do that, right? This is under preview. iPhone application is already available. It's a stable release, so iPhone application, you can use that. So the idea being that rather than actually having these huge machines that are going to be required for the clients, these clients can actually use a server that's far away from them, right? If they have an internet connection, they can be traveling, they can be roaming, they can be in some other country, they can be right now in this COVID-19 situation, they can be anywhere. All of us are working from home at the moment. We can still access our laptops. We can still access our office desktops in this case, right? All of the data would be saved per user. A user account would be created. Azure Active Directory is being used for the security. Azure Active Directory is being used as the credentials, as the authentication marker for getting into this machine, for getting the access of these machines. So it's pretty straightforward, right? You can actually try to do this. You can actually have a variation of this as well, right? You can have these multiple images that can be deployed, and different people can be given access to different images, and directly applications can also be deployed and people can get direct access to those applications as well. So it's totally up to you. You want a single machine that has multiple applications and multiple people are accessing that single or two machines or three machines, multiple access or multi-session, you can go with that. Or you want each of your users to have a separate machine in WVD, again you can have that. If you have certain users that you just want to give them an application, go ahead, right? If you want to give multiple machines to a user, go ahead, right? Now, what do you need to do this WVD business? Now, how do you start working with WVD? That's the thing number two, right? What does Randy need? What does Adam, Betty, and these users need? They need to be part of Azure AD, right? By the way, people who have active O365, E3, E5, and business licenses, they can use WVD at any time. There's no additional cost, right, for WVD, right? M365, Office 365 users, you can get a Windows 10 VDA license as well in order to use WVD, in order to become eligible for WVD, right? So basically, how do we create this machine? We go into Microsoft Azure, we go into search, just go into the search bar, go into enterprise applications, go to WVD, create the machine. Shortly I'm going to show you a demonstration of this as well, so don't worry. And right now, as of recording time of this video, this has a free trial. WVD has a free trial. I'm going to put a link under the description if I can, so that you can access this free trial. Register for it, have fun with it. It's pretty simple to use, it's pretty straightforward. You don't really need to have any experience working with VDI or configuring VDI, so you don't need to be a wizard on VMware or Citrix. You can just open the Microsoft Azure portal, configure your VM, configure your images, configure your applications, start working, right? Now, all of these people being eligible for accessing this virtual machine on WVD, right? Now, there's one last thing in this is, what operating systems can this machine have? When we are talking about the machine that's in the cloud, I just gave you the example of this server or this machine with Windows 10 multi-session, right? Are there any other operating systems that can be a part of it? You can actually get a Windows 7 image as well. And by the way, I know Windows 7 is end of support. Windows 7 is not is end of support, and there's nothing that we can do about it. But you can get Windows 7 in WVD, and we have extended this up, and we get this support of we get the support till I think 2022 in case of Windows 7, right? You can also use Windows Server 2012, 16, or 2019 as well. 2012 R2, by the way, right? You can use Windows Server 2012, 2016, or 2019 if one of your users is at home and they want to access a Windows Server 2012 R2 for something, or they want to use, or they have to use Windows Server 2016. Can you provide that as an image? Yes, you can provide that as an image, right? But things change a little bit in that case, right? If there's a particular user that wants to access this Windows Server machine, then, well, this is not going to work. That changes a little bit. What are they going to do? What are they going to need? They are going to need Windows Server 2012 or 2016, RDS, CAL. They would need a client access license, and then they would be able to use Windows Server 2012. So the requirement for Windows 2012 machine is not this, it is RDS CAL. This is just a slight technicality that I thought you should know. So pretty straightforward. It's a simplified version of the VDI. It's a managed version of the VDI, right? You don't want your office people, or you don't want your end users in the office to actually be stuck in a premises, right? You want them to be working from home. This is more of like the BYOD approach, if you will, right? Bring your own device that you can use anything. If somebody is comfortable with an iPad, somebody is comfortable with a laptop, you don't need to get the company-based laptops, right? And if a certain user has to access multiple images, let's say I want to access as a user Windows Server and Windows 10, can I be given two images? Can I be given the access of two images? Of course I can be, right? So is it technical? Slightly, yes. But is it as complicated as a usual VDI solution? Of course not, right? Most of the things are being managed by Microsoft, namely like the broker is being managed, the load balancing on the VM part is being managed by Microsoft in this case. What does the customer have to manage? What does the actual user have to manage? Is that okay? Manage your clients and manage the applications that are running on that machine, right? So pretty straightforward. User-based licensing plus the cost of running the VM and WVD, right? So this is all it entails. So let me know if you have any confusions in this, if you want to know more about WVD or want me to post more videos about it. Anything else regarding GCP, AWS, Microsoft Azure, of course, just let me know. Put them down in the comments. Do subscribe to the channel. That helps a lot. Thanks for watching.